What's up, ladies and gentlemen? How's it going? So, this week's episode is with a guy called James Jackson, also known in the industry as Jacko. Jacko is a part owner of a company called Listen Up. Listen Up is PR and radio plugin and DJ promo service. Kind of do everything promotional for anyone in any scene, really, but Jacko kind of concentrates on dance music and radio plugin and DJ promo. I've worked with Jacko for a number of years now. He's worked a lot of my records and done an amazing job. So this conversation was just a little bit about the industry, a little bit of what he does, and just some kind of stories on what records he's worked on, etc., etc. I really enjoyed this. I hope you do. James Jackson, how's it going, sir?
Hello, mate. I'm good. How are you?
You were just like, I don't want to comment on. You were just saying, I don't want to comment on the size of your hair, and I must say,
yeah, mate, it's pretty fucking big. To be fair,
Johnny Bravo is going to be extremely jealous of that.
Fido Dido. Do you remember Fido Dido?
No, what's that?
Basically, he was like the lemonade. It was the cartoon that went with. Was it 7-Up? I think it was.
Fido Dido.
Fido Dido, mate. Check him out.
I'm googling
he had
this
this
now.
Like massive wavy hair. He didn't have as much grey as me though, which is really starting to notice in the lockdown a lot more than it did.
This dude.
Fido Dido.
Yes. See, I was thinking more Johnny Bravo.
He was like an animated character for a 7-Up ad.
Is it Johnny Bravo? Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, that's far worse.
Can you see it?
I'm not as trim as him, mate. Actually, no, I look pretty much the same.
Yeah, literally. Dude, my grey hair. So I literally never have like any side hair at all. I just always like get it shaved off. So no one can ever so no one can ever see my grey hair. And it's the only part of my head that I get grey hair. And now everyone's like, Will, you're looking old. I'm like, damn. It's like I'm 30 next week.
I bet you're picking the grey ones out of the beard, aren't you? Or are you dyeing that now?
Nah, I would never dye that. I saw a mate. I'm going to call him out. OC and Verd, Ben from OC and Verd. I saw him do a live stream the other day and he's dyed his beard again. And his beard is like darker than his hair. And I'm like, dude, you can't do this, especially at our age. It's just like...
It's against the law at our age, mate. Fucking hell.
I think the chicks dig it, to be fair.
What, the grey hair? Yeah, if you can get out.
True. Anyway, man, how's things?
Yeah, really good, mate. Really good. It's Friday, busy week. Had a really good week this week. It's been pretty intense, but the last sort of 3 months has been all right for us as it goes. It's been pretty good in terms of what we do in terms of radio and streaming. Press is a bit tougher, but it's we've adapted as we always do with everything. We always adapt and move forward, change our model and change what we do to work with the current climate.
So before we go into like depth and everything like that, let's kind of go back a little bit and be like, what do you actually do? Obviously, I'm going to give you a nice little intro, which everyone have heard already. But I guess it's just, I think your role in the industry, especially what you like when you first come into the industry, I don't think people have, or I don't think anyone's really ever heard of radio pluggers.
I don't think anyone's heard of radio.
No, exactly.
Until they put a record out.
Yeah, and I think it's until you kind of start writing bigger records and used to kind of like people were showing more interested, and then you're like, I might need a radio plugger. And obviously you've been working on my stuff for a long time. But like, what's the whole deal with it all?
I think it's always been there, but it's always been very much sort of daytime radio. Essentially, backstory was I was promotions manager at Defected Records for a long time. And I left there to join, I was there for about 8 years. I joined Luke Neville, who's a daytime radio plugger.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago now. And at Listen Up. And he, at the time, was a national daytime radio plugger. And then sort of specialist radio became more and more important and it's always been there, but it was normally sort of a thing that labels did themselves in house, which is what I did at Defected. And essentially, I joined him to start really a specialist radio promotion department alongside sort of club promo, DJ promo, and essentially was to sort of promote records to specialist radio like we do daytime radio, essentially. So relationships with producers, presenters, programmers, everyone in a radio world, but on a specialist radio tip, essentially, which is obviously your Annie Macs, Pete Tongs, Danny Howards, etc.
Yeah, because I guess being from the UK, we have this insane kind of radio culture that I don't know if it's anywhere else really in the world. You'll be able to tell me that, but it's always felt like from like pirate radio days to even when Radio 1 it was years ago, but when Radio 1 kind of started playing like electronic dance music and things like that, where years ago obviously didn't. And I just feel like a lot of our electronic music culture comes from radio, and like it has this huge importance in the culture of dance music compared to, let's say, for instance, America. I know there's some amazing shows in America, but I just don't feel it's as big of a culture as it is here. Like for me,
I think we represent underground radio, underground music a lot better on a radio level. I think obviously over the years, platforms like SoundCloud and what have you have made sort of unknown artists much more discoverable.
Yeah.
But I think the next level to that is what we do with specialist radio, and in the UK, I mean, your Rinse FMs, NTSs, and even down, even like stations like Worldwide and Soho Radio are, they all have their place in breaking presenters and music, and they all have their scenes, and I think we've always had that from pirate radio back in the day, and I don't think it is as big as anywhere else in the world. I mean, we work globally. There's obviously your Pete Tongs and Annie Macs in every territory.
Yeah.
But I don't see the sort of pirate radio, community radio, regional radio that to the levels that we have. Largely, a lot of those they obviously have those small networks, but they're normal. They're like your sort of more like talk radio and top 40 radio rather than actual specialist genres or specialist sort of niche sounds, essentially.
Yeah, totally. Because I obviously being in America and watching a lot of like the old documentaries, I think radio in America was mostly hip hop. I can't remember the radio station in New York. Is it Hot 94?
Hot 94, yeah.
I think it's Hot 94. And I can't remember the guy's name. I should have done some research before this, but there was a DJ that was kind of known for like, he kind of was going through like the Africa Bombata stage. I can't remember that. But it feels like it's kind of lost. And now to break radio in America is like, it costs you a shitload of money. And
it's tough. We dabbled with it for a little bit. It's tough. It's because there's a dance, there's dance radio essentially in the US, which is essentially sort of 12 panel stations, and they all sort of decide whether they give your record rotation, and based on the amount of rotation and airplay that you're getting, it goes up the dance airplay chart. And then maybe if it hits number one, it has an opportunity to go towards top 40, which basically takes you to the bottom of the tree and you start all over again. But obviously that's on a much broader level, top 40. But yeah, it's tough there. I mean, I think channels like Sirius XM and KCRW in LA and those guys, Tim Sweeney in New York, those guys they've all been sort of champions of more underground stuff. I think the movement of Diplo into onto Sirius XM to give him a channel was a really good move. His platform is quite broad in sound. He likes everything from sort of deep techno to the more noisier sort of EDM side of stuff. So I think it's there. It's just not as broad. And I think it was Tongi that said it a few years ago. that when we were in that sort of EDM boom, that was the equivalent of us being in the 90s, at the beginning of the 90s,
totally.
in terms of our dance scene. And they're almost 20 years behind us in terms of a dance scene there. And it was only really the EDM boom that sort of changed that. And I think over time, the channels there and the stations there have evolved. But they're never going to kind of catch up with us. We're always going to be sort of ahead in, not saying they're not doing a good job, but it's more, we've been around a lot longer doing it in the UK than anyone else has.
I think also having like the BBC is something so lucky to have as like the British public. And I guess anyone can listen to it now with like the BBC Sounds app and things like that. But to be able to have a radio station that isn't filled with adverts and that they work purely on their demographic, if you know what I mean. They're purely aiming to get a certain age group on their different stations, and I think that's kind of something
that's their only agenda. So they represent everything across that. There's no music based on, you know, marketing and adverts and what have you, and they earn their money from the license payers, and they don't have that agenda essentially to have to cater for anyone specific.
Well, they're also not allowed, are they? They're not allowed, because
they have to sort of represent. They have to represent the UK really as a music scene, and whether that's Jack Saunders doing his indie show, to, you know, Annie doing her show, to Pete doing his, you know, playing techno on a Friday night. I took the Martinez brothers in actually to Radio 1, and they to see Pete, as it goes, to do an interview with them not long ago, sort of just before Christmas, and they were blown away by the actual sound that was being played on air, on radio, on a Friday night in the UK nationally. Like, they just couldn't get their head around it. For them, it was just like a totally new environment.
It is amazing.
It is.
It is, because obviously, like, as you know, I live in Detroit, and when I'm in Detroit, I very rarely listen to radio. It's just not something that I would do, and it's just it's not because there's anything that I want to listen to. But Friday night comes on in the UK, and it's like 7 o'clock or even 6 o'clock now. It's like, let's listen to radio, and you're listening to radio for as long as you possibly can, which I think just kind of gives it's not like there's any other choices, because a lot of the other stations do exactly the same as well. And it's just kind of part of the British culture, which is absolutely amazing.
I think you know, like, I have such a broad taste in music, and I think that's purely down to radio. You know, I grew up on like Don FM and Kiss FM and, you know, whatever pirate radio my ghetto blaster could tune into, essentially, with a big coat hanging out the top of it. Which gave me such a broad taste in music. I mean, the kids in the office will rinse me all the time, because unless it's got a 4/4 beat, I'm not into it. But it's not strictly true. But it is kind of, you know, like, that's everything from drum and bass to garage to dubstep. And I went through a dubstep phase of really liking it. You know, we worked a lot of dubstep, and you know, grime now gets a lot of big rinsing in our office when we're in the office. But I think, and you know, pirate radio and UK radio does represent such a broad sound. And, you know, even Radio 1 with 1 extra and 6 music either side of it, you know, I think you get such a broad spectrum of music that, and there's no adverts. So I would go as far as say most of, you know, nearly all of the broadcasters in terms of specialist radio are broadcasters. You know, they want to bring you sort of a broad spectrum of what they're into, and they're, you know, trying to get people involved in music, and they do that really well with their events as well.
So who, if you were like, just could choose anyone on radio to like just listen to, and it would be your like go-to, and I'm not trying to get you to be like, this is my favorite, but like generally like vibe, because I like, for me, if like, don't get me wrong, I love Pete, Annie, and all of those guys, they're the best, but for me, when I was younger, I used to work in a fish and chip shop, okay, and I'd listen to Zane Lowe every Friday, every night, literally every Monday to Thursday, 7 till 9 or something like that, and I discovered so much music from him. And
he was a great broadcaster, very, very broad in sound, very broad in, you know, in what he wanted the audience to listen to. You know? He could wax lyrical like I've never heard anyone wax lyrical. You know,
he was insane.
He just would talk about music in a totally different way to anybody else. I mean, Tongy for me is the one that I grew up with most. I think he's his his history in broadcasting is like unbelievable. And I think, he was a pioneer of dance music in the UK. He was
Still
the
is.
original pioneer. And for me today, look, I listen to most of the Radio 1 specialist shows every week.
Yeah.
But my go-to every Monday morning, if not live, is Tongi,
It's
and I think just because he's always done a very broad sound in what he does, he's always been very sort of, he's trying to cater to a wide dance audience, not just playing techno. Because if you hear him play out, he's a techno guy. He's probably more now a bit more melodic, but his show represents global dance music, and I think that's why it's so appealing. But I love Benji B. Benji B is a great listen.
He's amazing. I obviously I know of Benji B and I know what he's done, but I've never really taken time to listen to him.
Yeah.
And I listened to one of his streams the other day, which was pretty much just his radio show that he was just recording, and it kind of reminded me of Zane Lowe but smoother, less in your face, very eclectic.
Yeah, very eclectic, but in a different way. Because Zayn would play a Cyrus D or a Pride record, but he'd also play an indie record or a drum and bass record, or and I think had he been on air in the grime era, I think he'd have probably hammered a lot of grime as well. He used to love Dizzy and all those guys, and I think. Yeah, and Benji does exactly the same, I think, but in just a different way. And I think that's the beauty of those shows, is they kind of have their own. I still love to listen to Giles. Giles Peterson for me is the most calming listen. Like if you need a calm Wednesday afternoon, the soothing tones of Giles Peterson, and he's awesome. But I think all those shows are brilliant in their own right.
Yeah.
If in their own, I think, and that's kind of what they try to achieve. I think at Radio 1. But then I think a lot of other stations do the same as well. You listen to Worldwide FM; it's so left, but it's brilliant. It's educating.
Yeah, no, totally.
And I think that when the whole streaming sort of platform, particularly Spotify and Apple Music, sort of came into play, there was an element of shit. Is this going to kill radio? And I think, especially when Beats came in with Beats One, I think it actually changed it. Everyone sort of changed their minds again and went, actually, no, we still need radio. But the fact that Apple Music needed a radio station to be able to connect the dots between their platforms and they invest heavily in that.
Insanely.
And it makes total sense. And I think, still now, we wouldn't have a scene without radio. And I think it's weird. It's weird because there's not many people that do what we do as a job as well. Labels obviously have their in-house pluggers and they do amazing jobs at what they do and run their artists. We just do dance music and that's it, really.
Yeah, because obviously, with Corona being around, I think I was talking to Jam at the beginning of all of this, and he was saying how much radio has kind of been part of the community. And I spoke to Charlie T on the podcast as well, and she was saying exactly the same, how it's kind of the one time where everyone can just listen at the same time and everyone's listening to the same thing and everyone can kind of respond and just be part of something when they can't be part of anything together.
Yeah. There were some crazy stats at the beginning that in the first sort of 3 or 4 weeks, obviously it was a bit panic stations for everybody. Everybody in music sort of panicked a little bit and was just like, fuck, DJs couldn't tour. Would there be normal radio shows? Could presenters go in and do shows? Is the streaming platform going to be able to manage to put out records? Are the labels going to be able to put out? And I think there was a mad stat that was something like radio went up 12% in listenership across the country,
which is amazing.
And strangely, the streaming platforms and dance music particularly dropped off 20%. And I think it showed that you need that connection, especially if you're locked in at home on your own. You need that sort of connection with someone.
It's hearing that voice as well, isn't it? And it just being part of something.
Exactly. And it is community vibes.
What's your thoughts on the whole streaming vibe? Just generally.
I think in the early days, I was a little bit pessimistic about it. I thought, no one was really making any money off it.
Yeah.
I went through the era it defected when it went from vinyl and CD sales to convert to being a dance label, going into the Beatport and Traxsource days.
Yeah.
And so where you went from making £4 or £5 on a vinyl to making 75p on a download, and like people were file sharing all over the world, and there was a real bad dip in the defective model had to be reshaped and redesigned just to be able to work in that market.
Yeah.
And then they sort of settled, and downloads, we were still making, even if it was on iTunes, you were still making decent download money. And then the streaming thing came in, and I think SoundCloud messed with it for quite a bit. And then Spotify came about, and obviously there was obviously other platforms before that, but Spotify we kind of felt like it was the big one. And I think, I was very pessimistic, but over time I think it's become necessary.
Yeah.
It's the Netflix of films, and it changes the landscape, and it changes how people make money, and it changes how what people's focuses are in terms of putting out music. But the reality is artists are starting to make money from it. And I think, you look at the download stores where you could file share, you get kids like downloading a record on Beatport and then sharing it across the internet for no apparent reason other than
you used to be able to download the Beatport Top 100 like every day. Somebody would just upload it all. And
I think that in itself, if I don't know what the exact Beatport numbers are now, but I imagine they're quite down in terms of because kids that were going and downloading dance music on Beatport can now go and listen to anything on Spotify. And I think, and you can listen to it as many times as you want. It doesn't clog up your hard drive. You can have it on your iPad, your whatever. And I think, it works. And I think dance music specifically for that platform has evolved to fit into that model. And I think now, we work with everyone from like Kolsch, for example, is a really good example of a real underground act on Compact. Their priority is now is about as much about selling vinyl is about doing streams and focusing on everything comes out on the same day. Nothing cannibalizes streaming because you can make money out of that now, and it's stabilized to that sense. I think initially, obviously, there was a lot of rumors and a lot of talk about artists not getting paid, but I think now you can make money out of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you're 100% right with how it's interesting how an algorithm of Spotify has kind of changed the whole industry, where people don't necessarily want to listen to a 9-minute record. So what do is you create an edit and create the edit into 3 minutes 30, and it completely changes what dance music is about. But it also allows millions of more people that would probably never hear it. Like let's say for instance with like Hallelujah, it's on like a one of Spotify's like biggest workout playlists.
Yeah.
And like, let's be honest, and this is no disrespect to people listening to that playlist. I know loads of people that listen to that playlist, but the likelihood of them going, oh, let's listen to some Will Clarke, because they just would never have heard of me.
Yeah.
And I think with the Spotify and the Apple playlists, they do put your music into so many different people's hands, which radio does as well. And I think having radio and Spotify now, and Apple Music, or any of the streaming platforms, really, it's kind of just broadened dance music to more of a, I don't want to say commercial,
mass market,
but it is a mass market. It's like, can you, like, I'm sure back in the day, if you sold 4,000 vinyl, you were laughing.
Yeah.
Like, you are proper laughing. If you do 4,000 streams, you're not happy at all. If you know what I mean.
No, exactly. No, agreed. But then you buy a vinyl and you listen to it 20 times, or whatever. I think it does make it broader. And I think, to be honest, you said about the edit and stuff, because I know that a lot of people don't like doing that Spotify edit, or, especially when you make a record, you make it for a club landscape. But if you want to listen to a record on radio, you get more of a shot with a radio edit on radio than you do
totally
an extended 7-minute version. And even if even if you don't have an edit, someone's going to crop it down to an edit,
and it's going to be awful.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
You're better off, programming a record yourself and editing it yourself and making it sound like a tight 3-minute version than you are just leaving someone else to do it to their own devices.
No, I totally agree. So, what's like the proudest records you've worked on? Because I like we've only been working for like 4 or 5 years, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't think that much. So, like, I know you've done some amazing stuff, but we don't really ever talk about what you're actually working on. So, like, what would you say that's like put Jacko on the map?
I don't really think anything's put me on the map. I just sort of sit in the wings and just sort of
keep going,
throw records at people. I think, like, it's hard to sort of pinpoint one record. I think stuff like the early MK stuff.
Yeah.
And I think mainly it's the proud moments when you get a record from going from being a club record, which is a specialist record that there's no expectation on, and taking that from there to all the way to an A-list at Radio 1.
Yeah, that must be amazing.
And that's not me on my own, that's my whole team who are all incredible at what they do. But being involved in every single one of those records, like we actually, to be honest, we've had a few of those recently. The Hosh record recently.
Yeah.
Hosh is signed to Dynamic. He's done. I think Dynamic's actually partly his. He's a very underground techno artist. He took a really great vocal and turned it into something really strong. That we took that from the hottest record with Annie to all the way to 11 weeks on the playlist at Radio 1 daytime, and Kiss and even Capital FM added it.
That's mad.
And it didn't really ever go mad past the top 40, but it's such an underground record it went the whole way. It went the whole way, and those sorts of records, and we do a lot of those. But I think they're very hard. They're very hard to come by and very hard to deliver. And like they're the ones that sort of that I'm proud of. If Frankie Wah is another one of late. He's super talented, super nice guy. The Come Together record became sort of Annie's, tune of the lockdown, unofficial tune of the lockdown. And that was a hottest record sort of 6 weeks ago, and that went on playlist yesterday on Tuesday.
Oh, did it? That's amazing.
Yeah, it went on the C list at Radio 1, and obviously she's championed it hugely. The label that it comes on is Ministry is an incredible label, very good at what they do.
Was it initially signed to Ministry?
Yeah, he's signed to Ministry as an artist. Okay. Initially, it was a track to come out to highlight a mixtape that he'd done, which was 16 tracks, all of his own originals or remixes of stuff as well, but all Frankie Wah singles. And essentially, it was a specialist record. Like let's get it as do as good a job as we can on it. And it reacted. It got play after play after play. I think we had 35 plays in the first 4 weeks on the BBC, which is amazing. Again not very, very easy to come by. It went on playlist this week, and it's a huge achievement. And he's such a nice, humble guy. And he's over the moon. For him, it's just like he's a dream for him. So
yeah.
We'll see how far we can take that. But they're definitely the achievements for sure. Like those ones that are unexpected and you can take them all the way.
Yeah, because I guess it's the one thing. Well, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of my mates and myself in the produce, we don't ever go in the studio and be like, this is gonna be A-list Radio 1. We don't ever think that. And I think even with You Take Me Higher and even Hallelujah to a certain extent, where I didn't ever expect them to get what they got. But I guess it's just...
Got a good plug, I reckon.
I reckon so. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of but then again, it goes back to that British culture of dance music. We're brought up with it. I can remember there's on countless occasions in the top 10, there's just dance records. And yeah, don't get me wrong, they might not be the most underground dance records, but they're still 4/4 and they're still a dance record.
I mean, we had a number one recently with the Imanbek remix of St. John.
Yeah.
And that's the first number one we've had in. I think I can't actually remember the last number one we had, in honesty, because to get a dance record that far, you're competing with, we went up against The Weeknd, and Doja Cat was in there, who we do as well, and you're going up against these. I think Drake dropped his album at the same time, and you're going up against these major global superstars. St. John is a big star in himself, but he's quite niche. And Imanbek is an unheard of kid from Russia, He just did a sick remix. It sounded right. It worked. And the label worked it brilliantly. And it went to number one. And that in itself is a huge, huge achievement, because dance records don't get that high anymore.
No.
Because they're up against, and that takes it back to streaming as well, I suppose. Because, your streamers, you following your superstars like The Weeknd or whoever, whether it be Drake or whoever, they can hit top tens in day one.
Yeah.
Off the back of their streaming followers. I think there was a time where Guetta was very similar, because his social media numbers were so high that if he put a record out, all he had to do was post it on his social media, and it was he was hitting the chart that week.
Yeah.
So I think those sorts of things are I think that's one of the proudest ones of this year, actually, for me.
That's cool.
That Imanbek record.
So do you think getting like a number one or top 5 or something like that can be kind of a negative to a certain extent as an underground artist?
I don't think so. I mean, some people see it as that. I think, you look at acts that, super credible acts like Route 94 or Second City that have had massive hits.
Yeah.
But, and obviously their automatic reaction is to go, whoa, I don't want to be that it was just a one-off.
Yeah.
Even Hosh will probably do the same. I think he'll go and put like sort of 10 techno EPs out after this, because, they're essentially freak records, they're just records that connected at the time. And so, like Root and Second City, those guys that had those sorts of records have gone the other way and just gone and put techno out and played techno events for the last, since those records were out.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad thing. It made them the big name that they are.
And
because without those records, they wouldn't have got them there. They wouldn't have got to that, be able to go and do those gigs and do those profile things. It's just how you handle it in the post of it, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's as long as you're not putting so much pressure on yourself trying to do that again.
Yeah, it's harder to do that.
Yeah,
and it's worse to do that.
I also think there's a perception of the public where they want you to do that again, and I think. I to be fair, also my views is like, if you can write good records, then fuck it, why not? If you know what I mean. But it's when it's a freak record. I think let's say for instance like the Camel Fat Boys, if you know what I mean. I was talking to them the other day, and they've never tried to get in the top 40, but. No. They do every time. I imagine
there's an element of pressure now.
Yeah, major record labels.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that? Major record labels getting involved.
I think if you go to the right place, if it's the right move for you, it's the right move for you and the record and the project. I think there's some brilliant dance A&Rs out there that work in major labels. I think I manage Kaz James. We've just announcing today, actually, we've just done a deal with Pete Tong for his new 360 label, which comes out via Sony.
Yeah.
Tong is a legend, so I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer there for me. But there are a lot of other, big, good dance A&Rs out there, and I think if the project's right, and that's what you want, and that's what you want to achieve, then go do that. If you want to go and put minimal techno out, go and put it out on an underground label.
Yeah.
But if you want to if you want to be propelled into more of a commercial world and a more of a broader world outside of the underground, then if it works for you, go and do it. Major labels bring a lot to the table. They bring
massive amounts.
They invest in their artists. They invest in every angle. There's massive teams behind every record. And they get results. You only have to look at labels like Positiva and Ministry and
FFRR.
Yeah, you know those. Andy at FFRR is, who I know really well. You know, there's a lot of labels out there and a lot of that do good jobs and know how to put away a dance record.
Yeah.
Just because they're in a major doesn't mean too much to me. I think it can only be a good thing for the scene because they're injecting cash into a scene where there's at the moment there's no live.
Totally. Yeah, so, they have such big pull on power in the Apple Musics, the Spotify's, the radios and things like that, just because they have so many big records. If little old me went over to a major and kind of they're going to be injecting so much time and effort into that because they don't want it to fail. They can't afford records to fail, and if a record fails, it looks bad on them. It doesn't look bad on the artist at all. It looks bad on them.
Exactly, and I think when they invest in advances, if they invest in an advance in you, the more invested they are in the record, the more they get behind it. I think look, there's nothing wrong with someone like Defected putting away a record, or someone a smaller independent getting a record all the way. That's fine, but I think they do it on a more of a grassroots guerrilla sort of guerrilla promo type vibes, really. Whereas with a major label, you have that infrastructure to be able to deliver a record. Probably not easier, but certainly with a stronger backing.
Yeah, I think the one thing you don't get with majors is I don't necessarily know the right word for it, but the culture of the brand, if that makes sense. Let's say, for instance, like your drum codes.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at naming record labels off the top of my head, but like you like with you get a real following with the kind of more grassroots independent labels that they have true fans. Well, I think a lot of people with majors, you have like XL. Let's say, for instance, XL is probably one of my favorite record labels in the world.
Yeah, agreed.
And what they've done is insane, and they're at the point. Let's say Ninja Tune as well. Like, although Ninja's an indie, it's still I would still kind of class it more as a major because of what they've achieved. But I don't think there's many majors that have that real following nowadays than what
No, I don't think people follow. I mean, XL was a subsidiary like FFRR or Ministry of Sound or
Positiva, etc. Yeah,
Positiva. They're a subsidiary of a major, like a dance arm of a major label. But then I don't think there was ever really a massive Positiva fan base.
No, I think it was just with DJs, wasn't it? And
I think independents create a community. It's like a community sort of vibe.
Yeah.
They have a community and they have a following, and they, there's usually a figurehead at the front of that, whether that's Jamie Jones at Hot Creations or Dunmore at the head of Defected or whoever, and they follow that and they follow their tastes.
Yeah.
And discover music outside of that because of that.
Yeah.
I don't think, I think that the major label structure is different. They sign records to be big.
Totally.
The target is different.
It's a business.
And again, there's nothing wrong with that either. Independents do the same thing. They just do it on a different scale, maybe.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to majors. It's a huge business for them.
Yeah.
Rather than an independent, it's still a massive business for them, but the amount of money they're putting into a record isn't necessarily going to affect them if the record doesn't do well.
No, it's market share, isn't it? It's and it depends on I think it depends and varies on the project. If it's if they have a strong belief in a record, I think a good example of that was Depeche at Ministry, and the Immenbeck remix of St. John was like, we think this is massive.
Yeah.
We're going to get behind this. We didn't even start working at a radio until it had been out for 2 months because the strategy was, let's go out, let it do its thing.
Yeah.
Let it do its thing. Let it build some numbers. Let it do its thing. We'll come back in January and we'll start in January with a plot, which an independent can't afford to do. They can't afford to not get behind a record from the off because they need it to work straight away because their margins are a lot shorter and a lot smaller. So they can take more risks as a major label. I think that is, but in the same sense, that went on because of that strategy. It went on to be a number one record, you know. And that's.
I think also with nowadays with streaming, I think late growers to the like late records can get picked up late, or if you know what I mean, and it can eventually turn into a bigger record than what you thought it would just through streaming.
Yeah.
But I guess, is that often? Like, would you say you
Yeah.
worked any, like, the one I can think of
sure.
is the one I can think of right now off the top of my head is like MK Storm Queen. Like the original came out and did nothing, and then like I think it was like an edit. It wasn't
even Storm Queen was the act.
Yeah.
And MK and Look Right Through,
yeah,
was the record, and it was right at the end of my sort of time at Defected, and in fact I left as the original
came out.
So I worked the original, and then I left, and then I believe then the whole remix package got put together, and the MK Dub 3 or whatever it was ended up being
huge,
the version.
Yeah.
And everyone thought it was MK Storm Queen, and it was like and it was a whole big kerfuffle. But yeah, Ministry of Sound, well, I don't even think they were part of Sony then.
No, they were by themselves.
I think Defected upstream to Ministry because they were doing their thing. And
yeah.
But I think, yeah, it does. It still does happen. You know, major labels are still looking to sign records. I think I'm trying to think of a recent one. Patrick Topping, Forget was one of the ones, but they turned offers down. They didn't want to go to that major label route.
Yeah,
you know, that was trying to get picked up. I think I'm trying to think what else was. Oliver Dollar was another one which had just doing its own thing, and then, funny enough, doing your own thing.
That was a great record.
Yeah, and then I think that was picked up by Defected and then upstreamed again, from what I remember. I might be wrong on that, but there have been those, and there still are. And I think, you know, like Ibiza can be a big
massive
those sorts of things,
yeah.
Because, you know, that big sort of summer records,
yeah,
it might be on Hot Creations or a smaller label, and they go on to do great things, and be picked up by major labels. I think Positiva built their catalog out of that back in the day.
100%. I never forget, like, living in Ibiza, and every year there'd be one record. Yeah. Like the last time I was living.
It's still to this day, except for this year.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's as powerful as it used to be. I don't know if there's generally one. Like, I remember the last time I was living there, it was Man with a Red Face, the remake that Mark Knight and Funk Agenda did, and that was like, you could guarantee you'd hear that in most DJ sets all around the island.
Last year's song was.
I don't know. I maybe just because I'm not on the ground, I'm not really noticing it much. Rebuke.
That was
Along Came Polly was huge.
Year. Along Came Polly, yeah, that was big. I'm trying to think. There was a few last year. I'm just trying to. Oh, fucking hell! Sorry.
You can swear.
Srirachi, Joys.
I don't know that record.
What?
Yeah, I don't. I've got to pull it up now.
That was huge last year, and there was like a massive bidding war that Defected sort of won in the end.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, that was a lovely.
That was last year's. I mean, I think that went for like 250 grand or something in the end. Yeah, and that was off the heat of that. If you have a look, was purely off of Marco Corolla playing at Amnesia right at the beginning of the summer. And I think it was Amnesia. It might have been somewhere else. But anyway, Marco Corolla playing it, and the video went viral. And
what's the original sample?
It was, oh God, I think it's the OJs. Google it. I think it's the OJs. If I've got that, if I've nailed that, that is impressive. Because I couldn't even remember the record.
I'm doing this, Roberto
Srirachi.
Joys. Finest by the SOS Band.
Oh, SOS Band, that was it. Yeah.
SOS, yeah. Yeah, it's I never forget the like how powerful Ibiza was with Tunes of the Summer. It was
and it still is.
It's amazing. Such a shame.
But I think that's great though. I think, it is a shame that this year is just, I just literally 2 minutes before you called me, I spoke to Luke this morning, and we were like, shit, we've got Radio 1 Ibiza still booked. Maybe we can still go. Which was like the 29th of July, and we booked to go on the Wednesday to go to Paradise and then go through to the Sunday and then come back. We were like, yeah, do you know what? We still might be able to go. And literally before I got on this call with you, I got an email from BA saying your flight's been cancelled. And I was just like, oh,
that's the worst. In fact, to be fair, my parents are supposed to be going out there like mid-July, and they haven't had their flights cancelled yet. But I think as of the 1st of June, Spain is stopping the quarantine.
Yeah.
So you might still be able to go. But
they've just cancelled my outbound flight. They haven't cancelled my return, which is even more annoying.
I don't know how true any of this is, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the brands have just like stopped doing parties. I think it's just all local stuff.
I mean, I've had conversations because Kaz had quite a few bookings lined up for the summer, and he was supposed to do opening of High. He was supposed to do a number of. He had a few High shows with Black Coffee and what have you sort of lined up, and from what I can tell, I don't think it's going to be happening this year. I think the island will be open and the restaurants and the bars and what have you, which might be a perfect time to go to Ibiza.
Well, you can chill out.
You can still have a bit of fun, but you do it during the day and by the beach bars and instead of like what it's become now, which is, tables in clubs. But I think, I still love the place and I've already missed 2 trips there this year because of this lockdown. Rough. So it's pretty rough.
I'm thinking
and Miami and 2 trips to Ibiza.
Tell me about it.
Mykonos opening was supposed to be this weekend.
Does Mykonos have a scene?
Yeah, mate, it's wicked.
Is it mental?
Yeah, it's wicked.
I've never been there.
Scorpio's there, which is just unbelievable. It's like 1,000 people on the beach.
Damn.
Yeah, it's insane. It's really good. And they do have a very good scene there. It's really good, actually. It's just a bit punchy there.
Is it?
Yeah, it's quite punchy. But no more.
Is it just full of English? Is it just full of Brits?
Brits, German, Australian, funnily enough. But it's a beautiful place.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I think I actually have played there. I think I played with Mark like years ago.
Right.
In some like white. It was like this club that was like half outside, half inside.
Yeah, like that's the thing now. Most apart from one club in the town, most of the venues are outdoors, which are just like wicked.
What's your thoughts on the whole like UK scene with how majority of everything is just gone to like massive warehouses?
Yeah, I'm very much a heads down grotty club guy. Yeah. The last club I went to before lockdown was Berghain, so
grotty to another level.
I went over there with Scuba and his manager Scott, and I'm more of a club guy. That's my thing anyway.
I think
I'm not a big sort of warehouse rave type. I'm not even a big festival goer, to be honest with you. I'm very much a heads down club guy.
What do you think on how it grows a culture though? Because I think personally for me, like even in Bristol, let's say for instance, as much as I love Motion and I love all the guys that run it, a lot of the small venues have just like kind of had to close down. And I wouldn't say that's because of Motion. I'd say that's because of just how the culture is evolving to like people want to go and spend.
The culture is changing to selling tickets.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's become. And shifting tickets and, first phase is sold out, second phase is sold out, third phase. Now your tickets are going to cost you 170 quid. And I think sometimes I kind of feel like it's lost that element of rocking up to a grotty little after party and that. But that said, the scene has become much more broader in the sense, and that goes back to what we're talking about with radio, broadening its reach and broadening people's sort of tastes. I think the scene has become much broader. So why wouldn't you do bigger festivals? So it's like going to see, when I was a kid, I went and saw Michael Jackson or whatever. That was what you did until you were old enough to go to a disco.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what kids do now. They go to concerts put on by DJs. And that's I think that
every weekend
gets them into what's that?
Every weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that gets them into it. That brings them into our scene at that end, and that can only be good for the scene if kids are buying into that.
Oh, it's great. It's how we earn money at the end of the day. It's the only reason.
And I think it's great. But I think for me personally, it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
I prefer to be in a grotty little after party somewhere, but that's just me.
Yeah, I also think though it kind of
came up.
I also think it's kind of it slows down newer artists to come through being good selectors.
Yeah, for sure.
Because a lot of these big lineups are like branded lineups, and if you're not part of that brand, if you're not part of that crew, you're kind of just not getting a look in as an artist.
But if you look at crews like Fuse and stuff like that, they've built it from nothing. They've built it from
they've done an amazing
little bar, and then they can go to 338 and put 4,000 people in.
Yeah.
And I think, you got to. I think most of those brands are either behind, as you say. But then you've played for the Dirty Birds of this world.
Dude, I'm one of those people that play for these brands, and I love it. I love it. I think
if you can't get into that and you can't release on their labels, then you have to do your own thing.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing you can do these days. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And a lot of people do it. There's a lot of cool little parties out there that are growing. And, I think really if you look at even some of the biggest party, but Drumco didn't start as a fucking 5,000 capacity rave. Do you know what I mean? It's
like they've been doing that for years.
Exactly. So I think it's more about, it is, I think if you want to get to that stage, then I think you've got to try and sort of put your own effort in, put the effort in yourself, or try and get on those labels. I think that's the only way to do it these days.
Yeah. Write good records.
Has to make sense these days. What's that?
Just write fucking good records.
Yeah. Mate, quality cuts through.
It's true though, isn't it? I'm sure you get it a lot, but it's like, how can I do this? How can I do that? Why aren't I doing this? Why aren't I doing that? And it's like, just write good records and the music will kind of shine through.
Yeah, it does. It's quality cuts through. I mean, we're in a massively busy time at the moment, like huge. There's so much music about, even in this climate. And it's tough, but quality does cut through. And I think if a record is quality enough, as it's it cuts through.
Totally,
and,
man.
What are you this weekend? Today's anthem this weekend on the Jam show.
Today's anthem. That was good news this morning, wasn't it?
Great news this morning.
Jam's been killing it.
To be honest with you,
I wasn't expecting it. I was like, oh, nice. He's been playing the record a lot.
Yeah, he loved the last one as well. So it's really good. It's really good. And I think, you've built a relationship with him and those guys, and I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely, man. All thanks to you guys.
Yeah, well, quality cuts through, mate.
And a good record. Right, mate. Well, let's wrap this one up. Thanks for jumping on. For anyone that wants to get involved with Listen Up, how can they kind of follow along?
Instagram is probably the easiest way, which is Listen Up Biz.
Yeah.
BIZ. And just Google us.
Nice one. All right, dude.
Yeah, we're about. Look, thanks for your time, bro. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, man. Have a great one.
Nice one, mate.
See you in a bit, dude.
Speak to you later.
So that is a wrap, people. Big love for listening. Hope you all enjoyed that one. If you did, I'd love it if you could go and share it with your mates or your girlfriends or your boyfriends or anyone that you think will enjoy it. If you could give us a little review, that would be even better. It just means that we can keep doing these podcasts. Anyway, hope you all have a great week. Keep safe. Look after each other. See you soon.